The prophet Samuel was in mourning. King Saul, the man he had anointed to lead Israel, had broken the ancient laws and turned from God. Now, the nation's future hung in the balance. When Samuel arrived in Bethlehem, the village elders trembled. They asked, "Do you come in peace?" In those days, a prophet's presence often meant a legal judgment was coming to the city. "I come in peace," Samuel replied. He explained he had come to perform a sacred sacrifice to the Lord. He commanded the elders, and specifically Jesse's family, to consecrate themselves for the ceremony. Consecration was a legal requirement. To stand before God's prophet, one had to be ritually clean and dressed in their best. Jesse and his sons prepared, unaware that a royal selection was beginning. Jesse presented his firstborn, Eliab. Seeing his height and strength, Samuel thought, "Surely the Lord's anointed is here." He looked like a king, fitting the same mold as the failed Saul. But God corrected the prophet. He warned that humans judge by the eyes, looking for height and muscle, but God judges by the heart. Eliab, despite his impressive stature, was not the one. Next came Abinadab, then Shammah. One by one, 7 of Jesse's sons passed before Samuel. Each was handsome, each was strong, and each was legally rejected by the prophet's silent headshake. Samuel was baffled. "The Lord has not chosen any of these," he said. He asked Jesse if these were all his children. Jesse admitted there was one more, the youngest, out with the sheep. Samuel refused to start the ceremonial meal. He insisted they send for the boy immediately. In ancient culture, making a prophet wait was a massive social disruption, showing how important this child was. While his brothers were being measured by their appearance, David was in the fields, proving his heart through the lonely, dangerous work of a shepherd. Now, his quiet life was about to end. As David entered, the Lord spoke to Samuel's heart. "Rise and anoint him. This is the one." Despite being the youngest and the least expected, David possessed the heart God sought. In front of his stunned brothers, David was anointed. This was a legal and spiritual coronation. The oil represented God's choice, signaling that the authority of the kingdom now belonged to the shepherd. The atmosphere in the house of Jesse changed forever. The hierarchy was flipped. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David, while the legal weight of his future began to settle. While the Spirit landed on David, it departed from King Saul. Because of his rebellion, Saul was now tormented by a distressing spirit, trapped in a prison of fear, anger, and deep melancholy. Saul's servants saw his suffering. They knew that in ancient times, certain music was believed to soothe a troubled soul. They searched for a musician who was not only skilled, but spiritually grounded. Word had reached the palace of a son of Jesse who played the harp beautifully. Saul sent messengers to Bethlehem, demanding that David be brought to the royal court to serve the king. Jesse sent David with gifts, a traditional custom when approaching a superior. David left the quiet hills of Bethlehem, carrying his harp into the lion's den of Saul's increasingly unstable palace. When David arrived, he entered a dangerous world. Saul was a man of war and shadows. Yet the young shepherd stood before him with a peace that the king had long ago lost. As David played, the music worked a miracle. The distressing spirit would depart, and Saul would find relief. The rejected king found comfort in the presence of the one chosen to replace him. Saul grew to love David and made him his armor-bearer, a position of high trust. David was now learning the inner workings of the kingdom he would one day rule. Right under Saul's nose, war had returned to the borders of Israel. The Philistines gathered their forces at Elah, but this was no ordinary battle. It was a psychological stalemate that paralyzed the heart of the nation. From the Philistine camp stepped Goliath. He was a champion, a giant who stood nearly 10 feet tall. In ancient warfare, he was a living siege engine, designed to shatter a man's will. Goliath proposed a legal wager. "Choose a man and let him come down to me. If he kills me, we will be your servants. But if I kill him, you shall serve us." This was representative combat, a custom meant to save lives by letting 2 champions decide the war. But among the thousands of Israelite soldiers, including Saul's sons, not one man dared to step forward. David had returned home from the palace to help his father during the war. Jesse, desperate for news of his 3 eldest sons, sent David to the front lines with supplies for his brothers. David arrived just as the armies were taking their positions. As he ran to greet his brothers, the giant Goliath stepped out for his daily ritual of mockery, just as he had for 40 days. David was shocked. He didn't see a giant. He saw a man defying the living God. He asked, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" Eliab was burned with anger. He accused David of being prideful and neglectful of his sheep. It was the classic response of a fearful man trying to silence someone with actual faith. Word of David's boldness reached the king. Brought before Saul, David made an incredible declaration. "Let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine." Saul tried to give David his own armor, but David could not move in it. He realized he could not fight with another man's strength or a king's failed methods. He had to be himself. David rejected the king's bronze and steel. Instead, he went to the brook. He chose 5 smooth stones, simple tools of a shepherd, placing his trust in the God who had protected him from lions. The world saw a boy and a giant, but in the legal court of heaven, the roles were reversed. The giant was a man standing alone while the boy was backed by the Creator. Goliath felt insulted. "Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks?" he roared. He cursed David by the gods of the Philistines, promising to feed the boy's flesh to the birds. David's response was a masterpiece of faith. "You come to me with a sword and spear, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, whom you have defied." As the giant moved to attack, David ran toward him. He didn't hesitate. He knew that the battle was not his to win, but the Lord's to settle. In the hands of a shepherd, a sling was not a toy. It was a lethal weapon. David swung the leather strap with a skill honed through years of protecting his father's sheep. The stone flew. It bypassed the bronze shield and the heavy spear. It struck Goliath in the only vulnerable spot, the forehead. The giant's strength vanished in an instant. Goliath fell face first upon the ground. The champion of the Philistines, the man who had terrified an entire nation for 40 days, was defeated by a single stone and a boy's faith. David used the giant's own weapon to finalize the victory. In a world of symbols, this was the ultimate sign. The enemy had been destroyed by the very thing he trusted in. The fear that had paralyzed Israel was broken. The army surged forward in pursuit of the retreating Philistines. David, the shepherd of Bethlehem, had become the savior of the kingdom. David returned from the valley a national hero. The boy who had arrived to deliver bread had delivered a nation. But in the ancient world, fame was a double-edged sword. Saul's son, Prince Jonathan, saw David and felt an immediate, soul-deep connection. Despite being the heir to the throne, Jonathan recognized a divine spirit in David that transcended politics or jealousy. In a stunning act of humility, Jonathan entered into a covenant with David. By giving David his robe and weapons, the prince was symbolically acknowledging that David was the true chosen leader. As the troops returned home, the women came out to meet them with music. They sang a song that would change the course of history. Saul has slain his thousands and David his 10,000s. The song cut Saul to the heart. In the ancient Near East, a king's power rested on his reputation. By crediting David with more kills, the people were inadvertently crowning him. The next day, the distressing spirit returned to Saul with a vengeance. As David played the harp to bring peace, the king's mind was twisted by a singular murderous thought. "I will pin David to the wall." Twice Saul hurled his spear. Twice David escaped. The music that once healed the king had now become a reminder of his own failure. David's presence was no longer a comfort. It was a threat. Saul became afraid of David because he saw that the Lord was with him. He removed David from the palace and made him a commander over 1,000 men, hoping he would die in battle. But Saul's plan backfired. His daughter Michal fell in love with David. Saul saw another opportunity. He would offer her hand in marriage, but the price would be a deadly mission against the Philistines. David completed the task and married the princess. He was now a member of the royal family. But as his status grew, so did the shadow over his life. The king was now his declared enemy. The palace was no longer a home. It was a trap. Saul had sent assassins to David's house to kill him in the morning. Michal, David's wife, warned him that his life depended on the night. In a desperate act of love, Michal let David down through a window. The national hero was now a fugitive. He left behind his status, his wife, and his comfort to escape a king's madness. To buy David time, Michal used a legal loophole of deception. She disguised the bed to look as if David were ill. This allowed him to put distance between himself and Saul's reach. David fled to the priest at Nob. He was hungry and unarmed. In his desperation, he lied to the priest, claiming he was on a secret mission for the king to avoid suspicion. Under the law, only priests could eat the holy bread. But in this mercy-led moment, Ahimelech gave it to David. He also returned Goliath's sword, which had been stored there as a trophy. But David was not alone. Doeg the Edomite, Saul's chief herdsman, saw everything. This witness would soon bring a catastrophic legal consequence upon the innocent priests who helped the fugitive. David found refuge in the Cave of Adullam. The palace musician and giant killer was now a cave dweller. In the silence of the wilderness, his transition from hero to outlaw was complete. David did not stay alone for long. Everyone who was in distress, in debt, or discontented gathered to him. He became a captain over 400 men, an army of the broken and the forgotten. In the cave, David began to build a new kind of kingdom. These were not elite soldiers, but men who knew what it felt like to be failed by the current law. He was their shepherd. Saul's paranoia had reached its peak. He accused his own men of conspiring against him. When Doeg revealed that the priests had helped David, Saul prepared to strike a blow that would shock Israel. Saul's descent into madness became a bloodbath. He accused the priests of treason for helping David. Despite Ahimelech's plea of innocence, Saul's paranoia had completely overridden the sacred laws of the land. When Saul's own guards refused to strike God's priests, Doeg the Edomite stepped forward. In a single day, 85 men who wore the holy linen were murdered. The city of Nob was destroyed. Only Abiathar escaped. When he reached David, the weight of the tragedy broke David's heart. He realized his lie to the priest had provided the spark for Saul's murderous fire. David and his 600 men, a diverse group of warriors in rugged leather armor and colorful wraps, are moving through the high, rocky cliffs of En-Gedi. Then, the unthinkable happened. Saul entered the very cave where David was hiding. To the men, it was a legal gift from God, a chance to end the war with one stroke. David's men whispered, "Kill him!" But David's heart was bound by a higher law. He refused to strike the man God had once anointed. He only cut a corner of Saul's robe. David emerged and called out to Saul. He showed him the cloth as legal proof that he could have killed him, but chose mercy. He asked the king why he continued to hunt an innocent man. For a moment, the old Saul returned. He wept aloud, admitting that David was more righteous than he. He recognized the legal truth. David would surely be king, and he asked for mercy for his descendants. During this time, the prophet Samuel died. All Israel gathered to mourn him. For David, the man who had first seen his heart and poured the oil of his destiny, was gone. In the wilderness, David's character would be tested again. Not by a king, but by a fool named Nabal. But it was Nabal's wife Abigail whose wisdom would save David from making a bloody mistake. David's men had protected the flocks of a wealthy man named Nabal, but Nabal had insulted them. Enraged, David was coming to seek blood. Only Nabal's wife Abigail had the wisdom to intervene. Abigail took the legal blame for her husband's folly. She reminded David that he was destined for the throne and should not stain his future kingdom with the blood of unnecessary vengeance. In his darkest hour, David's own men turned against him after the Amalekites raided their camp. Alone and blamed for the loss, David had to find strength in his God to survive. With the prophet Samuel dead and God silent, Saul committed the ultimate legal and spiritual breach. He sought out a medium at Endor, breaking his own laws to find answers for the coming battle. The spirit of Samuel delivered a final chilling message. God had torn the kingdom from Saul's hand and given it to David. By the next sunset, the house of Saul would fall. On the heights of Gilboa, the tragedy unfolded. Jonathan, the loyal friend and rightful heir, fell alongside his brothers. The line of Saul was being cut down in a single afternoon. Saul, the first king of Israel, met a bitter end. Rather than be captured by his enemies, he took his own life. The man who started with such promise died in total isolation. When the news reached David, he did not celebrate his rival's death. He wept for Saul and for his brother Jonathan. He ordered the messenger executed for daring to strike the Lord's anointed. The people of Judah came to Hebron and anointed David as their king. The long exile was over. The shepherd boy had finally taken his first legal step onto the throne of Israel. David had survived the giant, the palace, and the desert. He was king, but the true test was just beginning, ruling a nation that was still divided and war-torn. David's story changed how we see leadership. He proved that God does not call the qualified, He qualifies the called. He turned his years of suffering into songs of praise. For generations, David was remembered as the man after God's own heart. His victory over Goliath became a legal precedent for faith, that no giant is too big when God is on your side. Today, this story heals our identity. It reminds us that our wilderness seasons are not wasted. They are the training grounds for our future crowns. Your current struggle is your preparation. This is the Living Word. David's legacy reminds us that the same God who watched over the lonely shepherd in the hills is the same God who sits upon the throne today.
Did David's journey encourage you today? If so, subscribe it and share this story with someone facing their own giant. Until next time, remember, You are seen, you are loved, and your story is held in the faithful hands of God. God bless you, and we'll see you in the next story.